Most advice on AI skills today tend to be one of two camps. It's either so in depth where it's a coding tutorial, or it's so vague that you can't really follow it. Now, in reality, the skills that business leaders need to know is actually more related to how far along in their AI journey the business actually is. So let's break down the four different phases required for an AI implementation journey, and through each phase, let's walk through the required leadership skills to ensure that you're successful. Now, the AI implementation lifecycle starts with redesigning the current business. And this can range from a single business unit all the way to a company-wide transformation. But the core question is pretty much the same. How should the business operate now that AI exists? So the leadership skills required here is first decomposing the business into different processes, understanding at a high level where AI is feasible and not feasible. After you have some ideas, you'll have to prioritize the use cases of which ones you want to tackle first. Now, there's a couple of common issues in this phase here. First is honestly starting with tools first. In my experience, breaking down the business and finding problems is typically better than trying to find a tool and trying to match that to a specific business unit. Lastly, here's creating vague AI strategies. In my experience, it's actually better to break down the full process, and then from there, once you've identified those use cases and those high priority use cases, then you have full leadership alignment where it's very clear on what we're going to do first. For a real example, I worked with a Fortune 500 company in oil and gas to really redesign their full AI strategy and workflows. And like I mentioned, we started with mapping out the full end-to-end value chain. After this, we identified the pain points throughout the full process and then mapped AI use cases accordingly. Now, after this, we have to identify which use cases we want to start with first. And this is typically done through economic value, and you can also look at speed as well. But this phase is really seeing where AI can actually be implemented across your full business, and then prioritizing and creating a roadmap to actually go out and implement it. Now, after you've decided on a couple of high priority use cases, choose one, and then we'll go into the scoping phase. Now, once you choose an AI use case that you want to tackle first, now you have to start looking into the business requirements and also the technical requirements for that use case. Now, this can actually get very complicated, especially since we are translating this vague idea into multiple different factors. Now, we'll have to look at inputs such as user inputs or even data inputs for the machine learning models. Then we have to identify what the outputs of the machine learning model are, or even the UI for the end users for adoption. Now, it's important that we look at metrics and KPIs so that we understand the ROI of the individual use case going forward. And then lastly here, because we are scoping out a use case, we want to put together a project plan. And in typical project management fashion, we should be looking at risks and mitigations for those risks as well. So going back to the real world use case here, one of the issues that we identified was unplanned downtime. To look at technical requirements, so how much data and what is the data systems that we need to pull together. Here we're thinking about a predictive maintenance application, so this would be typically sensor data and also work orders and cases. Next is, what are the decisions that the AI should actually support? Is it a recommendation? Is it just doing a risk score? And really ironing out what the AI is actually going to output is important here. Then lastly, we need to identify the initial scope for the project. So instead of boiling the ocean here, we want to narrow down the scope on some individual assets or facilities and then expand from there once we've really proven it out. But here the scoping phase is ensuring that we are very clear on what the current process is, what we're going to be building at a high level from the business and technical standpoint, and then from there preparing for the next phase, which is actually doing implementation. So once we've identified the requirements for the AI use case, now it's time to actually do our implementation and technical delivery. And what skills are required for technical oversight? Now, I will say I come from a slightly more technical background as I was a software engineer previously, but you don't actually need hard technical skills for oversight. You should be able to judge the system and how it relates to the ROI of the project. And this means having enough technical literacy to understand things like the architecture and what the risks of the architecture could be. You should be able to prioritize trade-offs, so accuracy, latency, and obviously costs. You'll have multiple different teams, and you should be able to coordinate across your engineering teams, your product teams, and also the subject matter experts. And lastly, you should be continuously validating progress with the end users because you are building this application or AI system for those end users to drive adoption. So to go back to the predictive maintenance application that I implemented, imagine that the end users are complaining that the predictions aren't coming in fast enough. A lead would have to understand whether the current daily connections are good enough, or do we have to invest engineering resources to do a live data connection? And there's a lot of these different kinds of trade-offs and constraints, and this is really where the end user trust, the adoption, and then ultimately the ROI is going to come from. Now, after we complete the AI implementation, end users have already started, the next phase is really thinking about adoption and scale. Now, believe it or not, AI adoption and scaling is actually typically where most AI initiatives actually end up failing. And at this stage, this is really where leadership transitions into driving the adoption of the actual application or the AI system. You'll also want to measure the usage and the ROI outcomes. And then after a bit of time, it depends on the use case, you'll either decide to kill it or scale it out. Now, continuing in the predictive maintenance application that I implemented, once the system was live, we needed to ensure that the end users were trusting the application. And this could be as simple as implementing features to ensure that the AI is explaining itself, or it could even be something more complex like improving accuracy and changing out the AI modeling. Now, we also have to validate that it's fitting naturally within the workflows. We should have already done this during scoping to identify the UI and what the current workflow is. But now we could use a user acceptance testing, for instance, to validate that the end users are using it and it's working well for them. Now, only after we've done these does it make sense to actually expand the use case. And scaling in this example can look like predictive maintenance being implemented into other facilities, or could be using a new layer like generative AI to help technicians triage issues. But remember, scaling only works after we've proven out the value of the use case and end users are actually using it. Now, as you can see, AI success isn't really about the best tools or the best models. It really comes down to having and honing those right leadership skills at the right phase inside of your AI journey. And many companies struggle here because they have mismatched skills for different parts of the AI lifecycle. And so at the end of the day, those leaders that understand that AI is not just a technology, it's more about how you're implementing it inside of your company are the ones who are going to win out in the long run. So anyways, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.